Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the International Photography Hall of Fame induction ceremony. My name is Art Holliday, and I'm a longtime photography hobbyist. I love taking photographs, so I'm thrilled to be your host this evening as we induct the 2024 Hall of Fame class. A couple of my favorite TV news stories are profiles that I did a few years ago on some of your inductees. I got to interview Harry Benson and Walter Yost from Sports Illustrated fame. We are returning to a live in-person gala this year, and IPHF is moving forward in new directions by building on our past and charting new territory ahead. We greatly appreciate our guests in attendance this evening and your commitment to the art of photography. The International Photography Hall of Fame is devoted to honoring individuals of note who've made significant contributions to the art, science, and craft of photography, and who have leveraged the medium for the betterment of humanity and the world as a whole. That's one of the central charges of our mission, and we take that charge very seriously, especially since we're the only International Photography Hall of Fame in the world. The IPHF, now in its 59th year, includes the best of the best. Only 125 members, soon to be 131. That includes the most talented, most visionary, most creative, and most innovative photographers, inventors, and organizations. The unenviable task of choosing who is worthy of being a Hall of Famer is assigned to international jurors and an induction committee. Now we proudly recognize the 2024 inductees. The first inductee to the 2024 class of award winners is Eve Arnold. Eve Arnold was a pioneering American photojournalist and longtime resident in the UK, celebrated for her candid and empathetic portraits of people from diverse walks of life. She began photographing in 1946, then studied photography in 1948 at the New School for Social Research in New York. Her 17 books and personal connection to Marilyn Monroe brought her international fame. We are joined via video by her grandson, Michael Arnold.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to the International Photography Hall of Fame for this incredible honor. It's a true honor to see Eve's work recognized alongside such talented and influential photographers. My grandmother Eve was a pioneer in the world of photography. Her unwavering determination, her compassionate eye, and her ability to capture the essence of human experience made her a true icon. She wasn't just a photographer. She was a storyteller, a documentarian, and a champion for social justice. I was fortunate enough to witness her passion firsthand, to learn from her wisdom, and to be inspired by her unwavering spirit. Her work was a testament to the power of photography to connect people, to challenge perceptions, and to ignite change. As I accept this award on her behalf, I want to acknowledge the countless individuals who supported her throughout her career, her family, friends, colleagues, and of course, all her subjects, all played a vital role in her success. On a personal note, Eve was a dear friend and mentor to me, and her attitude and approach to life was a huge inspiration. I think her aim was to try to have her work accessible to as many people as possible, really. So her very first exhibition, I think, was in a solo exhibition, was in the 1970s. And she asked for her prints to be sold at a much lower price than they normally would be. And that was a big part of her work. The curiosity kind of drove her to want to get to the bottom of things and to learn about the true story behind the headlines, if you like. One of her most famous quotes, she said, if a photographer is compassionate and cares about the subject, much is given. It is the photographer, not the camera, that is the instrument. I'm absolutely thrilled to see Eve's work recognized by the International Photography Hall of Fame. I know that Eve's legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. Her work serves as a reminder of the importance of human connection, empathy, and the power of storytelling. Thank you again for this incredible honor.
Sam Abel has captured audiences with his disarming and compelling photographs, personalizing even the most remote corners of our world. Since 1970, Sam Abel has worked as a documentary photographer, shooting primarily for National Geographic. Over his 40-year career, he has presented a distinctive style with strong composition and a beautiful color palette. His motto, compose and wait. Please welcome to the stage, Sam Abel.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone on the board and the sponsors of tonight's gala. Thank you for the honor. It is a great pleasure to be back in St. Louis. Near the end of my career at National Geographic, I was here for the kickoff of a book with Stephen Ambrose. I said, "Where are we going to meet?" He said, "St. Louis, of course." Ambrose and I liked each other. We enjoyed our time in St. Louis. And 2 years later, he called me and he said, "Now we're going to do a book on the Mississippi River." I said, "Where are we meeting?" He said, "St. Louis, of course." He loved the city, its history, its importance, its continuing importance. Part of that is the International Photography Hall of Fame. I want to say a personal thank you to Elizabeth San Juan, who I know from a photography workshop. Her inspiration, her energy, her vision are going to take the International Center of Photography and the Hall of Fame to the next level. In honoring me, you honor a couple of groups of people. One, humble photographers in camera clubs, high schools, colleges. You also honor a population of photographers that I rise from, photojournalists and editorial photographers. Finally, you honor teachers. My father, who is shown here on the right in this photograph, was both a photographer and a high school teacher. He started the camera club at our high school. He and I went on outings together. He is the one who taught me to compose the picture, Sammy, and wait. This is a photograph by him. In its simplicity, humility, directness, low technology, and above all, heart. It is the photograph that I've tried to live up to all my life. It's a photograph of my brother standing in front of our grandfather's car. This is as close as I got to matching the excellence, the quietude, and I would say the endurance of my father's photograph. It's a photograph of him made in 1959 when I was 14 years old. I've lived with the photograph for more than 60 years. I have aged. The photograph has not. Nor has my father's handwriting. You may ask what you can learn in a one-room schoolhouse in central Kentucky. And the answer is eloquent thought and the handwriting to match it. It's a love letter he sent to my mother when they were secretly married in 1938. This is my mother. It has always been easy for me to describe the influence of my father. He taught me photography. It took me decades to realize the influence of my mother. She taught me what to photograph. Last May, my brother's 80th birthday, I made him a book. The title of it is When We Were Twins. The Able brothers, as photographed by their father and dressed by their mother. Despite our 3-year age difference, my older brother and I were presented to the world as twins for 10 years. You may guess, or you may surmise from this photograph that my mother had standards, and one of them was how things looked. This is a photograph I made when I was 14 years old of our living room in our modest home in Sylvania, Ohio. It has a strong relationship to a photograph I made in Ohio in 2010 on my way to the University of Toledo to give a commencement address. I did not think of that prior photograph. I simply responded to what was in front of me. I composed the picture and I waited, not expecting anything. But a dog ran into the photograph, leaped into the air and caught a frisbee. I had composed the picture and I was waiting. It started here, that photograph. That photograph of my mother's living room and her handmade curtains has a relationship to this photograph, my most well-known photograph. It was made in 1983 in Moscow on a day off. It was a Sunday. I'd been in Moscow for 3 weeks, attempting to photograph the life of Leo Tolstoy, evoke Tolstoy. I didn't know how to do that, actually, but my mind was open, and I saw this scene at 5 a.m. on a June morning. I made this photograph, took a Polaroid of it, and decided to spend the rest of the day working on it. I removed the curtains. Buses arrived, and so did citizens. I micro-composed the people. And then I made my first mistake, turning a very horizontal scene into a vertical. And then I made a worse mistake, replacing the Kremlin and Red Square with a parking lot, a bus, and several cars. But what I'm trying to get into this photograph is my abiding graphic line, the line of my life. It is a horizon line. Why the horizon line? Because I grew up on one of the flattest places on earth, the glacier-flattened landscape of Northwest Ohio. That is my line. It is the line I grew up with, and it persists in all of my photographs. And there is that line, but it's another mistake. Using an ultra-wide-angle lens, I've shrunk the Kremlin and greatly exaggerated the pears. But the solution to the picture is now made. I've used the horizon line and the frame of the window to block out the parking lot. And now I consider that the photograph is over. Now I'm not looking at the pears or the window or the Kremlin or the cathedral. I'm only looking at the clouds. Only they are in motion. And so I finished. I composed the picture. But then I waited. The breeze was blowing the curtain, and I waited for the breeze to lift the hem of the curtain into the photograph. I'm not looking at the clouds of the Kremlin, the pears of the window. I'm not even looking at the curtain. I'm only looking at the hem. Only it is in motion. Compose the picture, Sammy, and wait. The other thing to know about my mother is this: an embroidered map of the United States made in 1942 when she was pregnant with my brother. My mother's dream is that we, as a family of 4, would touch every one of those states, and we did. There was a reason. Travel was about education. And here are my brother and I dressed as twins on a banana boat in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on our way up the Mississippi to St. Louis. Why? To learn about America firsthand. It wasn't enough to look at the Mississippi or the boats. We had to get on board and handle the cargo. In college, I came under the influence of Dorothea Lange. Her humanism and the excellence of her photographic compositions silenced me. They silence me still. This is a small book. It is a book that changed my life, and it is a book I take to every workshop that I teach. Here I am in Santa Fe talking about Dorothea Lange and her humble, modest book. In college, I also came under the influence of Bresson and the great Bruce Davidson. What they imposed on me was full-frame photography. Since college, I have been a full-frame photographer. No cropping, no post-production. Every photograph finished in camera. I didn't know it when I was in college, but it was a career move. At National Geographic, you were judged on a Kodak slide, a carousel of Kodak slides that was shown to the editor in a dark room just like this. There was no cropping. There was no post-production. I fit at National Geographic because I was a full-frame photographer, and I still am. The culmination of my college career was the creation of a 2-volume yearbook. It hadn't been done before or since. Volume 2 contained all the mandatory and, to me, boring yearbook photography. Volume 1 was photographic essays done in the style of Life magazine. For that, I was the editor and the chief photographer. On the strength of that, I applied for an internship at National Geographic. My intern interview is the only job interview of my life, and I considered it a failure. I sent 2 parcels from my hometown, Sylvania, Ohio. Both marked special handling. The color originals were lost in the mail. The black and white parcel almost did not arrive. So when I came for the job interview, I was faced with my first failure. I had failed to use indelible ink to address the mailing label. All that Bob Gilka, the great Bob Gilka, had in his hands were my college black and white prints. Years later, after I had retired and he had long retired, and we were friends living on the coast of Maine, not far apart, I got up the courage to ask him why he had hired me. He looked at me sternly and said one word: potential. It was then that I realized that was his job. His job was to sit at his desk, look across it at the job applicant, and see if that person were smoking. If that person was smoking, he knew National Geographic could burst them into flames. And he was right about me. This is the great Bob Gilka, together with my wife, Denise Myers of Colorado Springs. There's a Hall of Fame. We're in it tonight. But there's also Mount Rushmore. And Bob Gilka and Denise Myers are on my Mount Rushmore. I met Denise in 1974. Together with her boyfriend and another couple, they were going to hike, that is, the Pacific Crest Trail, 2,400 miles, 6 months, 40-pound packs through the highest mountains of the far west. Denise is on the right with her boyfriend, Hal Simmons, also of Colorado Springs. The woman on the left dropped out after 50 miles. The boy wearing brown in the center lasted through California. Denise and her boyfriend went the distance. This is Denise near the Canadian border, 6.5 months later. Denise and I fell in love that summer. We were married 2 years later, and this is a photograph of her on the top of Mauna Loa. We're on assignment for the Geographic, photographing the volcanoes of Hawaii. We called it our honeymoon. The picture does not exaggerate the life that we shared as traveling together for 30 years until I retired from the Geographic. As I said, the Hall of Fame honors teachers. This is a photograph of me leading a workshop in Maine in 1977. At the top of this photograph, there's a young woman. You see her hair and her face silhouetted, or not silhouetted, but illuminated against a dark tree. That woman is in the room tonight. Her name is Pam Spaulding. She was a photographer for the Louisville Courier-Journal, where I also spent a summer. Pam belongs in the Hall of Fame, though I think that will never happen. She is too modest. Pam belongs in the annals of photography because she started a project 60 years ago to photograph one family. A mother in her first year of motherhood. Pam herself was a single mother of 2 daughters at the time. She put a notice on a Lamaze bulletin board. Would any mother consent to be photographed for 1 year? She got one return call. It was from a woman who said, I will allow you to photograph me for 1 month. That was 60 years ago. The project continues. One of the babies that Pam photographed is a United States congressman. The photographic project will last as long as Pam is alive. This is me at the same spot in 2017. When I retired from National Geographic, I did not retire as a teacher. I redoubled my commitment to photographic education. Workshops are a wonderful place to learn photography, but they're also stimulating for teachers. This is me with the great Ernst Haas. And this summer in Maine, I went to see the great Paul Caponegro, who's being inducted tonight. He wanted me to send you personal greetings on the honor. On behalf of Paul, I thank you. I want to conclude my talk by discussing 2 photographs. Doryman in the North Atlantic on my first National Geographic assignment. I'm in my first week, July 1970. In the North Atlantic with 2 dorymen, father and son, which of course reminded me of my dad and myself. But what was really on my mind was compose and wait. I'm not photographing the principal doryman, I'm photographing the father. That is, concentrating on him. I'm waiting for the North Atlantic to lift his dory and him above the horizon line. It happened once. And this is a young woman, a college student. Momo Kosaka is her name. a photograph I made in 2019. She rises head and shoulders above the horizon line. And now I want to say a word about Karen Pasilis, who was mentioned earlier tonight in the auction. Karen and I have collaborated on workshops for 20 years, and Karen is the producer of my soon-to-be-published retrospective book. This spring, Karen and I had a meeting in Puget Sound about the book. I was dismayed about its length, 400 pages. And she said, "Sam, have you ever considered splitting the book into 2 volumes? Your career had 2 eras, National Geographic and after National Geographic. There was the analog years at Geographic and the digital years since then. Can't there be 2 books?" And I said, "Karen, thank you. That is a brilliant idea." And so the yearbook, or the book, was split into 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Karen created this prototype so that you could see the book to be, which will be out this time next year. It harkens back, obviously, to the 2-volume University of Kentucky yearbook made in 1967. Thank you, Karen, for your vision and your inspiration and the purity of your idea. I want to end with a St. Louis moment. Photography has given me many glimpses of greatness. Not mine, others. And one day I got a call. Would I pick up Stan Musial at the airport? He needed to be escorted around Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live, kept under wraps because he was to be the guest of honor at John Grisham's birthday party. I was friends with Grisham's, friends with the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame, but I didn't know Stan Musial. We spent an afternoon at Grisham's Little League Park. I found a baseball hidden under the grass as we were leaving. I said, "Well, we have a baseball. Now all we need is a bat." I found the groundskeeper. He gave me a Little League bat. I put it in Stan Musial's hand, stepped back, and made this photograph. I hope it looks unspecial to you, but there are 3 thoughts in it. I've composed the picture, and I'm waiting, but I'm also thinking. I'm micro-composing his profile, especially his characteristically dramatic nose against the base path. I'm waiting till he hikes up his trousers and points the bat at the plate, all trademarks of the great Stan Musial. And then I took the mound and brought the heat. I threw the ball 3 times, and 3 times Stan Musial hit line drives, not grounders, not fly balls. And the 3rd line drive came straight back at me. I said to myself, I have to catch this. It hit me so hard that it bent my thumb back. It was black and blue for a week, which I took to be a badge of honor. Above all, I did not drop the ball. This is in my Hall of Fame. In closing, I'm about to take the photograph that my colleagues, my peers, consider to be my most accomplished. It was taken at a branding in Montana. Brandings are notoriously hard to photograph. They look like this: chaotic, disorganized, rugged, rough in every way, but especially rough visually. I was so despondent that I abandoned, left the branding, and went to a diner, had lunch, and read Time magazine. And in it was a review by Christopher Porterfield of the recently published diaries of Virginia Woolf. I was an English major in college, so I read it avidly. But I was unprepared for the quote at the end of it. If one does not lie back and sum up and say to the moment, this very moment, stay, you are so fair, what will be one's gain? Dying? No. Stay, this moment. No one ever says that enough. And when I read it, I thought, photographers say it. They say it every time they make a heartfelt picture, like my dad's photograph of my brother in front of my grandfather's car. Renewed by this, I went back to the branding, and a group had broken away, and now there was a clean background. I knelt in front of the cowboy with the brown coat and made this photograph. Why do my peers esteem this photograph? Because it has a number of narratives. Holding 4 or 5 narratives together in one photograph is not easy. All photographers know that. The photograph is dependent on the background. Compose the background, Sammy, and wait. It's dependent on one other thing. The cowboy at the back of the frame. He, like the doryman, like the woman on the train, rises above the horizon line. It gives him standing and stature in the photograph, and from him the composition flows. Four years later, I was honored, only the second honor of my life, to go along with tonight with a show at the International Center of Photography. I had made a promise that day in the diner that if I ever had a show and a book to go with it, I would title it Stay This Moment. But before I went to the show, I went to the New York Public Library to see Virginia Woolf's original handwriting in her diary. And right in the middle, you see it. Stay, comma, this moment. No one ever says that enough. We are saying it tonight. I am saying it tonight. This is the last photograph that I will show you. It's the opening of my show at the International Center of Photography in New York City. My father is the guest of honor. Tonight, you induct both of us into the Hall of Fame. You also induct Jim Baylog, my friend and fellow photographer. On this night at ICP, James Baylog's one-man show was also opening. It is uncanny to Jim and I that we shared that singular moment, that singular honor in New York in 1990. And now, 34 years later, we share the same podium here in St. Louis. For that honor, for Jim's great accomplishment, I thank you.
Sam, we're not quite done with you yet. We, your students from around the world, are celebrating you, Sam Abel, on the occasion of your induction into the International Photography Hall of Fame. We have gathered this money to augment the scholarship funds of both the Pacific Northwest Art School and the Maine Media Workshops to support deserving photographers in their continuing education. Thank you for being our beacon for these many years. Your teaching, your humanity, and your dedication to photography have immeasurably enriched all of our lives. Our next inductee, Martin Parr, is a chronicler of our age. In the face of the constantly growing flood of images released by the media, his photographs offer us the opportunity to see the world from his unique perspective. His photographs are original and entertaining, accessible and understandable, but at the same time, they show us in a penetrating way how we live, how we present ourselves to others, and what we value. Martin Parr sensitizes our subconscious, and once we've seen his photographs, we keep on discovering these images over and over again in our daily lives and recognizing ourselves within them. We are joined via video by Martin Parr.
So what a pleasant surprise it was one day about a month ago to receive an email saying that I've been invited to the Hall of Fame. And when I looked at the list of photographers that have already accepted this, I was completely amazed because it really was like a who's who of photography. I struggled to find any photographer there that I really liked who actually wasn't on the list. So what a fantastic honor it is, especially as I'm working here in Britain and my main field of exhibiting and working is in Europe. So the fact that the message has got out to America is pretty impressive to me. I'm sorry not to be there in person, but I'm very happy to take part in this small presentation tonight. The kind of work that I do could be seen as both photojournalism and documentary work, and I guess fine art photography as well. I like the fact that photography can be high and low at the same time. So I'm very happy to have my images on a t-shirt, and at the same time, that very same image can be hanging in the Tate Gallery here in London. So that compatibility of photography is something I'm really inspired by. I think part of my legacy will be a very big collection of images taken over the last 50 years that I've been a photographer here. So as well as working in the UK, I often get invited by either photo festivals or galleries to work abroad and to do what we call a cultural commission. This is where you'll go and visit a place for 2 or 3 weeks, take lots of pictures, and then provide them with an exhibition of the same images. So here in Bristol, I run the Martin Parr Foundation, and the purpose of this is to show it and to give a platform to other documentary photographers who've not been as lucky as me in terms of generating an income. I think British documentary work is very underrated, and we have 4 exhibitions a year. We have a library, we have a huge collection of prints, and this is something that we've been working on over the last decade, and we're still going strong. So I'm very happy to have this, and please visit us online and have a look at what we're doing. So it's been a great honor to be invited and inducted into the Hall of Fame. And if anyone's there, if you're in Bristol, please come and visit us here in the UK.
Ann Wilkes Tucker is Chairman Emeritus of the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. Not too long ago, the photography collection at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston was non-existent. But thanks to curator Ann Wilkes Tucker, it is now considered one of America's best. Acquire, exhibit, publish, educate, conserve. Those are the duties of a curator, and she has been doing it successfully for over 26 years. Ann has also published 26 catalogs. Please welcome to the stage Ann Wilkes Tucker.
I just want to thank the International Hall of Fame. I've been aware of it for many years, and it's quite an honor now to be included into such a gathering. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me. A quick summary of my career. I began to photograph as a beginner with a tiny camera at age 12. And I continued to photograph in high school and college, contributing yearbooks and magazines and organizing exhibitions of my work at college. Then in graduate school, what I do want to just sideline a minute. The photographs that I took You know the photograph of the old man in the river by the Mississippi that Robert Frank took? I took it just a few days earlier. Frank was much better. So, then in graduate school, I realized that I was not of the quality of the other colleagues in graduate school at the Visual Studies workshop. So I became a photo historian. And my graduate teachers, I was just incredibly lucky because I was then in a position to study with Beaumont Newhall, who wrote the first history of photography, and with Nathan Lyons, who founded the Visual Studies workshop. And the two men were incredibly different. Beaumont was the sweetest human being, scholar, extraordinary mind, but just a joy to be with, and he loved teaching. And then the other one was Nathan Lyons, who worked for a while at the Eastman House and then broke off and started the Visual Studies workshop, which has been an extraordinary school for photo historians and photographers in Rochester. And Nathan wrote a book, a very important book, called Photographers on Photography, which certainly when it first came out, it was just the book you saw under everybody's arm. You know, they'd just gotten it and they were reading it. And what Nathan recognized was that it was important that we not only have Beaumont's books and the sort of the scholarly view of history, but photographers' own voices. And so the whole book is about photographers writing about photography, and that was a book that stayed in print for a very long time. Another miraculous piece of timing came about, which led for Beaumont recommending me for a job as a photography curator at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. And that came about in a very personal way, because Beaumont was lecturing at the museum, and I had just gotten married and was moving to Houston without a job. My then husband was a doctor at the medical center. And that night, Mother knew Beaumont was lecturing at the museum, so she waited and she listened to the presentation, and then she waited afterwards, and Beaumont, just the gentleman that he was, she said that she was my mother, and he was so delighted that my mother, the student of his, was there. And Mother turned to him and said, well, we just learned that Anne and her husband are moving to Houston. And Beaumont turned to the then director of the museum and said, you're looking for a curator, and she's arriving tomorrow. And so the joke at the museum was always that I started with 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week, and then eventually 7. You think I'm kidding. Now, 39 years later, this girl from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, has traveled around the world acquiring photography for the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. We had a group of 12. Our presentations of works that are in the museum collection to give people a range of what we have now. Although we started first with 20th century American photography and then with American photography, and now we have works from the collections of every continent, including Antarctica, but I did not participate in the acquisition of that, or at least I didn't go to Antarctica. But the pleasure of those 39 years was not only learning about photography, but going to Czechoslovakia and feeling the hunger of people who had just gotten away from the wars, the walls that separated Czechoslovakia and other countries, and their hunger to have their work and their photographic history made known to other countries and being acknowledged. Wonderful talent there. And that was the great, extraordinary pleasure of this kid from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're not talking about a big town here. And to learn to go to walk into schools and museums and get the visual rush of what each of them was offering, and then bringing that rush home and attempting to acquire some of the works from the museum and building an intellectual collection has been an extraordinary joy. Now, I just want to talk in terms of the collection we've built. We have a collection of 30,000 photographs. I just want to isolate out two people who were precious to me. An incredible honor to get to know both of them was Irving Penn and Robert Frank. They couldn't be more different. First of all, I knew that when I came into the studio, I was talking to Mr. Penn. Always, in all of our years, even when we went out to lunch together, he was Mr. Penn and I was not, except in that level. He was soft-spoken. His dress was a stand-up open collar and a jacket, never, but his vision, his capacity to find a subject and to find exactly what he wanted in the subject. I also had the privilege of watching him in the studio. I was told later that was very rare, and I was lucky. But it was so fascinating for me to be able to look at Mr. Penn and the staff. When you went into the studio and he was about to take a picture, it was like a chapel. It was quiet. It was calm. It was intense. And he drew out of his subject some expression, some slight shift of the shoulder that made for these extraordinary portraits that he made. And then the very, very different experience of having the extraordinary pleasure to work with Robert Frank. There was a period when Robert was not as famous as he became later, and he needed money for an ill son, and so he came to us and he sold us a complete set of all the photographs in the Americans, which was extraordinary for the museum. But it also led to a building relationship where we eventually acquired work from before the Americans and a lot of work from after the Americans, watching Robert's career shift radically, so different than Mr. Penn, as different as possible, where Robert is working quickly, seeing a subject, clicking the camera, involving motion, involving a relationship between people and motion and the atmosphere around them. And then later, when he moved to Nova Scotia, then he expanded into these extraordinary extraordinary views of the Nova Scotia and its relationship to the sea. And I got to participate in watching these artists, both when I got to know them in their later years, watching them work and watching them put things together, and in later years when Robert was now writing on the surface of his prints and breaking open the mythology of the photographic surface. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be honored by this organization. But I want to tell you, it's not me, it's the people I had the privilege of meeting. It's the people I had the joy of learning from, of being scolded by Mr. Penn. There's a privilege. I thank you for this opportunity. I'm honored by your honoring me, but also honoring the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. When I came to the museum, there were 300 photographs. And when I retired 10 years ago, as I said, there were 30,000. And that wasn't just me, that was all the people in the museum, in Houston, in other places, who began to understand what we were trying to build and underwrote the things that we needed done. And so I want to say that I'm happy for me and for the museum and all the people who supported us in those 30 years. Thank you.
Richard Mizrak is considered one of the most influential photographers of his generation, instrumental in pioneering the use of color photography and large-scale format in the 1970s. For over 50 years, Richard has photographed the dynamic landscape of the American West through an environmentally aware and politically astute lens. His visually seductive, large-scale color vistas powerfully document the devastating ecological effects of human intervention, industrial development, nuclear testing, and petrochemical pollution on the natural world. He has exhibited around the world and published numerous books and been featured in dozens of catalogs since 1974. We are joined via video by Richard Mizrak.
Good evening, everyone. I would start with photography is the most extraordinary of mediums. It captures moments of existence, both personal and global, like no other medium. It is a time machine. I look at my family albums or photographs made by photographers since the medium's invention, and I am transported to that moment in time. I've spent the last half century of my life making pictures of my world. It has been so rewarding. Photography has given me, my life, a sense of purpose and has never let me down. And as I get older, I realize more than ever what a remarkable journey it has been. And to be honored here tonight with so many of my heroes is so moving. When I was first starting out, Paul Caponegro was a huge influence. And then I had the great fortune to work closely on my mid-career retrospective back in 1996 with the brilliant Ann Tucker. And so to be with them this evening is just fantastic. You make work in a historical moment and you feel like you know why you're making it. And more often than not, I have come back to work that I made 20, 30, or 40 years ago, and I'm stunned at how it shifts meaning. Now we can see how the world has changed. And it's little details like that, like photography captures almost secretly, like not letting the photographer know that that's what it's doing, what's gonna be of value later on. And I'm finding that with so much work. So a lot of my work is about the environment, and it can be hard. It's definitely challenging. I photographed bombing range. I photographed petrochemical corridors. I even photographed the Alonzo King Lines ballet dancers in the surf in Hawaii, and they were so joyous and beautiful. And in this historical moment, I felt like I wanted to do that. So my work has a balance of taking on difficult questions, but also celebrating the beautiful. And then to be in the realm of the heroes, my life's heroes, like of the likes of Diane Arbus, Dorothea Lange, Gordon Parks, whose work recently, color work recently, I've had the opportunity to discover big time. It's beautiful work. Robert Frank, August Sanders, Stieglitz, and on and on. Well, this is simply a once in a lifetime honor. I am so profoundly moved and honored to be with this realm of amazing people. I'm honored and thank you so much. I'm 75 years old. This is a once in a lifetime and it means a lot. So thank you.
Paul Caponegro was born in Boston in 1932 and is considered one of America's foremost landscape photographers. He became interested in photography at the age of 13 and decided to focus on photography at the California School of Fine Art, where Ansel Adams had established one of the first photography programs in the United States. Paul is best known for his interest in natural forms, landscapes, and still life. His subjects include Stonehenge and other Celtic megaliths of England and Ireland, the temples, shrines, and sacred gardens of Japan, and the deep mystical woodland of New England. He had his first solo exhibition at the George Eastman House in 1958, and his work has been shown in numerous exhibitions throughout the United States and abroad. Joining us via video, Paul Caponegro.
I'm honored that I've been inducted into such an illustrious group of human beings, being photographers, for the grand institution as the Hall of Fame. Well, you know, life is so full of surprises that a surprise is no longer a surprise. It's just an event. And this event is simply very pleasant. I'm delighted to know that there's recognition about my work, and so many other good photographers. Well, when I heard that I was going to be inducted, it brought me back to the time that I started photographing. And being a photographer, working, the camera being in the darkroom, I remember that it was the joy of being with the work. The joy is what really manifested itself. So I was pleased to be brought back to a time when I was intensely with the work. And that brings me to working with it now. You know, I'm an old codger. I can't get out in the field with a camera, but I can still get into the darkroom. So that enables me to invite some of my past students to come in and help me. So in that sense, the joy continues, being in the darkroom still, making old-fashioned silver prints with new-fashioned chemistry. And I'd say that's almost my legacy even, that I can invite some of my old students in and work at the darkroom with their help and keep that sense of joy, and I emphasize joy, alive in the overall process. Just the fact that I'm still a simple human being, alive to the possibilities that are out there for any human being. I'm delighted that I could do what I did. I'm pleased at how I got there. For as old as I am, the joy is still there, and I'm still participating. I think it's wonderful that, well, I'll be 92 next month, that I can still take part in what is such fun. Of course, it's an honor and rather special to be pointed out and singled out as being a little more acknowledgeable among so many. I'm quite happy with receiving this award. It tells me that the outside world recognizes that there are special things going on about them, and they acknowledge that.
Bea Nettles was born in Gainesville, Florida in 1946. Nettles has been exhibiting and publishing her autobiographical work since 1970. Since that time, she has had over 50 one-person exhibitions, including the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, the Light Gallery, and the Whitkin Gallery in New York City. Her works have also been shown internationally in major group exhibitions, and she taught photography from 1970 to 2007 at Rochester Institute of Technology, Tyler School of Art, and the University of Illinois, where she is currently Professor Emerita. Nettles is known for experimenting with alternative photographic processes. She utilizes several photomechanical printing techniques such as photolithography and silkscreen. Joining us via video, B. Nettles.
To tell you the truth, I was quite pleased that I'm with this group because many of them are what we used to call straight photographers or documentary photographers. That seems to be the focus of many of the photographers and curators and so forth, because I was always on the margins. I always thought of myself as making photos rather than taking photos, and I love photography, but to me it was another medium that I could incorporate into work that I was doing. Because of my background in painting and printmaking, there were certain desires that I had that at the time photography couldn't meet, such as color. Color, you can't imagine those days when color was very difficult and expensive and toxic and just impossible. And certainly to make images like the images of mine, that was impossible to do. The fact that there would be transparencies and blends and layers and multiple negatives, and some were half-tone dot and some were soft focus and some were sharp focus. You know, none of that could have been done except the way I sort of figured it out to do it. Well, I always worked personally from what I knew, and being female, that's what I knew. And honestly, I knew women photographers who would never even admit they had kids. And that was shocking to me, but that happened because they didn't feel that their work would be taken seriously. I didn't have a problem with that. If they didn't like it, forget it. I wanted to deal with what I knew about, and I felt it was important. I think that's why people relate to my work, is that it's quite honest and pretty open, and some of it pretty primitive, but it strikes a chord. I'm in fabulous company, and I'm very, very pleased and proud to be among many people that I've known over the years, especially from the early days of my work in the 70s and 80s, but even more recently as well. So it's wonderful to be in the company that I'm with, and a real acknowledgement of 50 years of work.
Our final award of the evening is the Visionary Award. This award was created to recognize a photographer or organization who has devoted their lives and photographic expertise for the welfare of humanity and is an inspiration for future generations. James Balog is an American photographer whose work explores the relationship between humans and nature. He has published 9 books and created numerous documentary films. James has received many awards for his work. He continues to change people's perspective on the environment, our interdependence with nature, and our perception of wildlife. Balog lives in Boulder, Colorado, and we are honored that he is with us tonight. Please welcome to the stage James Balog.
What a joy it is to be here tonight. We weren't planning it like this, but 3 of us on the stage tonight are old friends. Ann Tucker, who wrote the foreword for my latest book. Her name is right on the cover. And Sam, my old buddy from ICP, from, God help us, 34 years ago that we had a show together. This is a wonderful honor. And I am profoundly grateful to the entire Hall of Fame team for bringing me. I'm going to not really speak to the pictures tonight. They're more or less background, so I don't want them coming along too fast. Yeah, I'm really grateful for this opportunity and the pleasure of being in this company, this collection, this vision. 60 years or 59 years. It's amazing how long the Hall of Fame has gone on, and it's a great tribute to all of you who have made this happen. I have felt for a long time that we photographers are sort of like the antennas on the head of a caterpillar. You know how they have those little feelers out there? Well, we're the eyes at the end of the feelers. And the society is crawling around behind us, kind of fumbling along, but we're out there sensing, trying to figure out what's happening, testing, wondering, trying to make sense out of things. Now, I have photographed all sorts of subjects, from Isabella Rossellini nude in a studio with chimpanzees to Brooke Shields in a fashion show, corporate CEOs, all sorts of things that kind of came and went, but were, I often consider them to have been side eddies in the main current of my creative life, because the main current has been to be an environmental photographer. And as such, I've had the pleasure of being exquisitely sensitive to skylight as it transforms itself from cerulean blue to gold, to lavender, to deepest purple, and on into the inky blackness of night. To be a photographer is to inhabit the mystery of photons, pouring unseen through naked air until they touch an object. I hadn't realized that until I was at an exhibition in France a couple years ago and read the catalog for the show, and this physicist said, the photons always exist, but they have to touch something before they become real, before they become animate. I thought that was an amazing thing. So to be a photographer is to see those photons reshaped by a billion combinations of sun, cloud, season, moisture, latitude, and altitude. To be a photographer is to know that within those billions of combinations, you may be destined to find only one, just one, that quivers at the intersection of heart, mind, soul, muscle, eyes, neurons, and intuition. And that one allows itself to melt into your alchemy. That may only happen properly once in your life, but if it does, it's great. If it happens more than once, as some of us presumably have been fortunate to have, it's even better. Because when you do, you have the profound privilege of touching the grace of existence. Now, my work, as I defined it all the way back in the early 1980s, the important work, not the commercial jobs for Time or Life or Smithsonian or whatever, the important work, the stuff that was really coming from my heart, was an expression of what I thought of at the time as the collision between people and this other force called nature. And I started out looking at a lot of wildlife management issues and endangered species and other subjects, and over the decades realized that the semantics of this were wrong. I realized that I was wrong, that it wasn't about the collision between people and nature. We were all nature, that people were part of nature, and that we had inherited a semantic and a mindset from centuries, if not millennia, that described humanity as being outside nature, as being separate from nature. And this entire life quest of mine with the camera for the past 45 years has been finding a conceptual union between those two previously separate states of being, those two separate modalities. I've just been through an enormous process the past several years of editing and printing all this work, and I'm happy to say that the main set of images is now in the Library of Congress, also in the rare books collections at Cornell and Yale universities, at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, at the Denver Art Museum, and also I think many of you know about my work on receding glaciers as an expression of climate change. Well, I can't show it to you here tonight. It was a little bit too technically complicated to work with, but that series of work spanned 15 years, looking at receding glaciers in Alaska, Canada, Montana, Greenland, Iceland, the Alps, and the Himalaya by Mount Everest. And we accumulated 1.5 million frames of how the landscape was changing. And all of that work has been transferred to the National Snow and Ice Data Center, which is the primary repository of satellite imagery as well as ground-based imagery, looking at how the world has changed in recent years. The work took me into wildfires. I worked on ice for 15 years, but in the midst of that, I worked on 13 different wildfires around the American West, because the heating of the atmosphere has led to receding glaciers, but it's also led to a whole different fire regime and a smoke regime. We're all living in smoke now in a way that we never did before through many of the summers of recent time. So these images have been touching on a slice of our current history. And that's why I wanted to make sure they wound up in the collections that I mentioned, because we're living through a major change in the world as it has existed for many centuries. We are living through the middle of the change right now. I've come to realize that we humans depend on the stability of the fundamental elements of the world. An imbalance in the human element leads to an imbalance in the other elements. People are the only element that can restore that balance. No boundary separates people from nature. In damaging nature, we are damaging ourselves. And I had to go through a lot of personal suffering to figure that out. In protecting nature, we are protecting ourselves. True patriotism, real patriotism, will protect spacious skies and purple mountains, golden valleys and diamond deserts, from sea to shining sea. Against the tyranny of denial and the oppression of indifference, we must prevail and find a new vision of the relationship between human nature and the rest of nature. We, the people, have an inalienable right, not just to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but to clean air, clean water, and the security of a stable atmosphere. Our survival demands it. Our children deserve it. And photography helps us to understand that. And so the artistic quest, for me, for so many of us, keeps going on. All that looking, all that wondering, all that sensing. And what you are doing here at the International Photography Hall of Fame is helping to keep that spirit of questing alive. So thank you on behalf of the entire photographic community for doing what you're doing. Good night. We'll leave that there, but I'll come back and get that.
Okay. Thank you and congratulations to the International Photography Hall of Fame Class of 2024. This has been an extraordinary evening with some of the greatest photographers in the world recognized for their remarkable work. And they now are part of a larger society of excellence, the IPHF Hall of Fame. We are so glad you have been able to join us this evening, and we ask you to help IPHF continue the important work of its mission. Thank you for attending, and thanks to all of you for your very generous support tonight. We will now adjourn to the Turn Restaurant for dessert and coffee. Don't forget to pick up your auction items. Thanks to all of you. Please drive safely tonight.